Ryan has the security footage, Lauren. It shows you in the server room after hours last month, and the timestamps don't lie about what you accessed. He's ready to take it to the investors and the board if you don't sign the share transfer by Friday morning. You know what that kind of scandal would do to our name in this community. I trusted you with access to everything, and this is how you repay the life we built. Sign the papers I left on the counter, or I let him release the clip. Your choice. Don't play the victim now. We both know you've been keeping things from me, and it's time to make it right before this gets worse for everyone. Hi, my name is Lauren Bennett. I am 32 years old. Those 4 sentences from my husband, David, hit harder than any argument we had ever had in 5 years of marriage. I stood frozen in our kitchen, the crisp stack of legal papers he had slid across the granite island, still sitting between us like a loaded gun. My hands felt cold and heavy at my sides. I could hear the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a lawn crew trimming hedges somewhere in the gated community. But inside my chest, everything had gone silent. I had built my marketing analytics firm from a single laptop in our first apartment. David had joined later as vice president of client relations after his family's construction business hit a rough patch. We had merged our lives carefully, or so I thought. I kept majority control of the company in a trust my attorney had set up before the wedding, something we both agreed protected us both. At least that's what I believed until that morning. David's voice stayed calm, almost reasonable the way he spoke to difficult clients. That made it worse. Ryan Mitchell saw the access logs himself. He continued crossing his arms. He's been protecting the company's reputation while you were doing whatever this is. Sign the transfer and we can move past it quietly. No one else has to know. I swallowed against the tightness in my throat. Ryan is your coworker, David. Since when does he get to decide what happens to my company? Our company, he corrected, and the correction landed like a small cut. And he's trying to save it. The board won't tolerate another scandal. You know how this community talks. I looked at the papers. They were a clean professional transfer of 35% of my voting shares to David, backdated 3 months. The language was cold and precise. If I signed, I would lose the ability to block major decisions. I would still have a salary and a title, but the real power would shift. My mind raced through every late night I had spent building client dashboards, every pitch I had landed while David was at his family's struggling sites. I had never hidden anything from him. The access logs he mentioned couldn't exist because I hadn't been in that server room after hours and months. Yet the way he said it with quiet conviction made a small, ugly seed of doubt sprout anyway. What if I had forgotten something? What if stress had made me sloppy? I forced my voice to stay steady. I need time to look at this with my own attorney. David's jaw tightened the first crack in his calm. You have until Friday. Ryan already has the clip ready. One email and this entire neighborhood will know what you did. Think about what that would do to both of us. He turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word. The front door clicked shut a minute later. I stayed where I was, staring at the papers until the letters blurred. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I walked to my home office, closed the door, and opened a fresh, encrypted folder on my laptop. I started logging everything: the exact time of the conversation, the wording David had used, the fact that he had mentioned Ryan Mitchell by name 3 times. Methodical. That was how I had always solved problems at work. Treat this like a client crisis. Document, protect, respond. My phone buzzed. A text from David: Ryan is coming by the house at 4 to go over the footage with you. Be reasonable. I set the phone down without answering. My fingers trembled once, then stilled. I opened a new message to my best friend Jessica Ramirez, the only person outside the company who knew the full structure of my trust. Can you come over after work? Something happened with David. I need to talk. She replied within minutes: on my way. Do I need to bring wine or a lawyer? I almost smiled. Almost. By the time Jessica arrived, the sun was low over the manicured lawns of the gated community. She took one look at my face in the doorway and pulled me into a tight hug without asking questions. We sat at the kitchen island where the papers still lay. I told her everything, keeping my voice low and even. She listened without interrupting, her dark eyes widening only once when I described the security footage threat. That footage doesn't exist, she said finally. You haven't been near that server room in forever? This is a setup, Lauren. David and Ryan are working together on something. I know, I whispered. But if they release something edited or out of context to the investors, the damage is already done. The board hates bad press. They'll push me out even if I'm innocent. Jessica reached across the counter and squeezed my hand. So, what are you going to do? I looked at the transfer papers again. I'm going to sign a limited version, just enough to buy time. Then I'm going to find out exactly what Ryan has and why David is willing to burn everything we built to protect it. She studied me for a long moment. You sound calm. I'm not, I admitted. The words came out smaller than I meant them to. I'm terrified. But if I fall apart now, they win before I even understand the game. Jessica stayed until nearly midnight. We drafted a short counterproposal together, something that gave David temporary operational control, but kept my voting rights intact until we could investigate. It was a gamble. When she left, I locked the door behind her and stood in the dark hallway for a long time listening to the quiet house. David came home after 1 in the morning. I heard his keys in the lock and his footsteps pause outside my office door. He didn't knock. I didn't open it. The next morning, I signed the limited agreement in front of him and slid it across the island without looking at his face. He didn't thank me. He just took the papers and left for the office. That afternoon, Ryan Mitchell showed up at the house exactly at 4 as David had warned. He was younger than David, polished in a way that always felt slightly performative. He carried a slim laptop and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm sorry it came to this, Lauren, he said as I led him into the living room. David didn't want to involve me, but someone had to protect the company. I sat across from him on the sofa, my back straight, my hands folded in my lap so he wouldn't see them shake. Show me the footage. He opened the laptop. The screen showed grainy black and white security camera footage from the office server room. A figure that looked like me from behind walked in at 11:47 p.m. on a date 3 weeks earlier. She typed on a keyboard. The timestamp jumped. Another angle showed her removing a small external drive. I felt the blood drain from my face. The woman on screen moved like me. She wore a coat I owned. But I had been home that night on a video call with a client in London until after midnight. The timestamps on my own calendar would prove it. Ryan closed the laptop gently. We can make this go away quietly. David just wants what's fair. Sign the full transfer and no one ever has to see this. I met his eyes. That's not me in the footage. He smiled again, smaller this time. The board won't care about alibis once they see it. Perception is everything in this community. After he left, I sat on the sofa for a long time, staring at the spot where his laptop had been. My chest felt hollow. The man I had married was willing to let his coworker threaten me with fabricated evidence rather than talk to me directly. The betrayal sat in my stomach like something sharp and cold. I picked up my phone and called Thomas Reed, the attorney who had set up my trust years ago. He answered on the second ring. I need to see you tomorrow, I said. Something's happening with David and the company. I think I'm being set up. Thomas's voice was steady. Come to the office at 9. And Lauren, don't sign anything else until we talk. I hung up and walked to the window. Outside, the street was quiet, the houses expensive and identical in their careful landscaping. Somewhere in one of those houses, someone was probably living exactly the life I had thought I had. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass and let myself feel it for 30 seconds. The sharp, slicing pain of realizing the person I trusted most might be trying to destroy me. Then I straightened, wiped my eyes, and went back to my laptop. I opened the encrypted folder again and added Ryan Mitchell's visit to the timeline. Methodical, fierce. That was who I had to be now. But underneath the planning, a quieter voice kept asking the same question over and over. If the man I loved could look me in the eyes and lie like that, what else had I been wrong about? I stayed at my laptop long after midnight, adding every detail of Ryan's visit to the encrypted timeline. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a band around it and kept pulling. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my husband's calm voice repeating that Ryan had footage. The worst part was how reasonable he had sounded, like he was doing me a favor by giving me a chance to fix what he believed I had broken. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. My husband had already left for the office. There was no note, no text, just the empty side of the bed and the faint smell of his cologne still clinging to the pillow. I showered, dressed in the same tailored blazer I wore for client meetings, and drove to the office early. I needed to see the server room logs myself before anyone else arrived. The building was quiet when I badged in. I went straight to the small server room on the second floor. The door was locked, but my key still worked. I pulled up the access logs on the terminal inside. My name did appear at 11:47 p.m. on the date Ryan had shown me, but the entry was flagged as remote access via VPN. I had been home that night on a video call. I checked my own calendar and the call recording. The timestamps matched perfectly. Someone had either spoofed my credentials or manually entered a false log. I took screenshots of everything and emailed them to my personal account and to Thomas Reed. Then I left before the first employees arrived. By 9, I was sitting across from Thomas in his downtown office. He read the screenshots without speaking for a full minute. When he finally looked up, his expression was grim but steady. "This is sloppy," he said. "Whoever did this didn't even bother to hide the VPN flag, but sloppy can still be effective if they control the narrative first. Your husband and Ryan are banking on the board reacting to the appearance of wrongdoing before anyone checks the actual data." I nodded. My hands were steady now. The shock from yesterday had settled into something colder and sharper. "I signed a limited agreement yesterday to buy time. I need to know how much time I actually have." Thomas leaned back. "I'll file for an emergency review of the access logs with the company's IT provider. In the meantime, document every conversation. If they threaten to release anything, we treat it as extortion. But, Lauren?" He paused. "Be prepared. These kinds of disputes rarely stay private in a community like yours. People talk." I left his office with a folder of next steps and a heavier weight in my stomach. On the drive home, I called my best friend Jessica. She answered on the first ring. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough that my attorney is already talking about extortion," I said. The words tasted bitter. "They're using a fake log and a fabricated video to force me to give up voting control. And my husband is letting them." Jessica was quiet for a second. "You okay?" "No," I admitted. The honesty slipped out before I could soften it. I keep waiting to feel angry. Mostly I just feel stupid, like I should have seen this coming years ago. "You're not stupid," she said firmly. "You trusted the person you married. That's not a crime. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to keep documenting, and I'm going to find out why Ryan is so willing to lie for my husband. There has to be something in it for him." When I got home, there was a car in the driveway I didn't recognize. David's mother, Carolyn Bennett, was waiting on the front porch. She stood with her arms crossed, wearing the same pearl earrings she always wore to family dinners. I had met her only a handful of times. She had always been polite in that distant, assessing way wealthy mothers-in-law can be. "Lauren," she said as I got out of the car, "we need to talk." I unlocked the door and let her in. She didn't sit. She stood in the middle of the living room like she owned the air. "David told me what's happening at the company," she began. "He's devastated. The idea that you would risk everything he's worked for." She shook her head. "His father and I built our name on integrity. We can't have it dragged through the mud because of whatever this is." I felt the familiar tightness return to my chest. "Carolyn, there is no footage. Someone altered the logs." "I can prove it." She held up a hand. "I'm not here to argue evidence. I'm here because family protects family. If you sign the transfer and let this go quietly, Robert and I are prepared to help smooth things over with the board. If you fight it, we'll have no choice but to support whatever legal steps are necessary to protect our son's reputation. You understand what that means in this community." The threat landed softly but clearly. "Legal steps. From his family." I kept my voice even. "I understand." She nodded once as if the matter were settled and left without another word. I stood in the empty living room for a long time after the door closed. My mother-in-law had just threatened me with lawyers on behalf of her son, the same son who had looked me in the eyes and told me to sign or be destroyed. The hollow feeling spread. That afternoon, the stress finally caught up with me. I was on a call with a client when the room started to tilt. My chest seized. I ended the call early, told my assistant I had a migraine, and drove myself to urgent care. The doctor ran an EKG and blood work. Everything came back normal. "Stress," she said. I needed rest. While I waited for the discharge papers, I pulled up the patient portal on my phone out of habit. I wasn't looking for anything specific. But something caught my eye in the insurance claims section. There was a claim from 3 weeks ago, the same night as the fake server room log. It was under my policy, but the patient name was Ryan Mitchell. The visit was listed as acute stress evaluation at a clinic across town. The timestamp was 11:30 p.m. My hands went cold. Ryan had been at a medical clinic the night he claimed I was in the server room. And he had used my insurance. I scrolled further. There was another claim the same night for David, same clinic, same acute stress evaluation. They had both been there together while the fake log said I was stealing data. The doctor came back with my paperwork. I folded it without reading and walked out on shaky legs. In the car, I sat with the engine running, staring at the portal screen until the words burned into my memory. They had an alibi, a medical one, and they had used my own insurance to create it. I drove home in a daze. When I walked through the door, my husband was already there, standing in the kitchen with a glass of water. He looked at me like nothing had changed. "Ryan said you were reasonable yesterday," he said. "I hope that continues. The board is meeting Friday. We need this settled before then." I set my purse down carefully. I went to urgent care today. Stress. He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "You should take it easy." I saw the claims, I said quietly. "Both of you. Same night, same clinic, using my insurance." His face didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered. "You're reaching." "That has nothing to do with the footage. It has everything to do with the night the footage supposedly happened," I said. "You and Ryan were together at a clinic while someone else logged in as me. You lied about where you were. Both of you." He set the glass down. The sound was too loud in the quiet kitchen. "Sign the papers, Lauren, or the next thing that gets released won't be a log. It'll be the clip. And once one investor sees it, the rest will follow. Your choice." I felt the pain rise again, sharp and familiar now. But under it, something else was forming. A clear, cold line. "I need until Friday," I said. "Like you said." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Friday morning. No later." He left the kitchen. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway. Then I called Thomas Reed again. I found something I said when he answered. Hospital claims. Both of them were at a clinic the night of the alleged breach. They used my insurance. I have screenshots. Thomas was silent for 3 full seconds. "Send them. Now. And Lauren, do not go back to that house tonight if you can avoid it. Stay with Jessica if you need to." This just became something bigger than a marital dispute. I hung up and forwarded the screenshots. Then I packed an overnight bag, not because I was running, because I needed space to think without my husband watching every move I made. As I zipped the bag, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Heard you had a health scare. Hope you're feeling better. The board doesn't like instability, just something to keep in mind before Friday." I didn't reply. I carried the bag to my car and drove to Jessica's apartment across town. She opened the door before I could knock, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. I told her about the claims, about Carolyn's visit, about the text from Ryan. She listened the way she always did, without judgment, until I ran out of words. "What are you gonna do?" she asked again, softer this time. I sat on her couch with my hands wrapped around a mug of tea I didn't remember her making. "I'm going to prove the footage is fake. I'm going to show the board exactly what they did. And then..." I stopped. The rest of the sentence felt too heavy to finish out loud, and then I might still lose everything anyway. Because even if I won the fight, the man I had built my life with had chosen to stand on the other side of it. That loss was already real. No verdict could give it back. Jessica reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "You don't have to decide everything tonight." But I knew I did. Friday was coming fast, and the people who were supposed to protect me were the ones holding the knife. My phone lit up again on the coffee table. Another text, this time from my husband. Ryan just sent a still from the clip to Mark Sullivan. "One investor. As a warning, sign by tomorrow night or it goes to the whole board." I tried to stop him. I really did. I stared at the screen until the words stopped making sense. They had drawn first blood, and they were telling me it was for my own good. I set the phone face down. The tea had gone cold in my hands. Outside Jessica's window, the lights of the city glowed steady and indifferent. Inside, the only sound was the quiet tick of her wall clock, counting down the hours I had left to choose between fighting a war I might not win or surrendering the last piece of control I still had. Either way, something essential was already gone. I read the text from my husband 3 times before the words sank in. Ryan had sent a still frame from the fabricated clip to Mark Sullivan, one of the company's largest investors. The message was clear signed by tomorrow night, or the rest of the board would see it too. My hand stayed steady as I typed back a single sentence. "I'll be at the office at 8 tomorrow morning. We'll settle this then." I forwarded everything to Thomas Reed and to Derek Hayes, the private investigator I had quietly hired 2 days earlier. Then I called Jessica. "I'm staying here tonight," I told her, "but tomorrow I'm ending it." She didn't ask which it. She just said, "I'll be outside the building at 9 if you need me." Sleep didn't come. I lay on her couch with the hospital claim screenshots glowing on my phone screen. Ryan and my husband had both been at that clinic the night someone logged in as me. They had used my insurance to create an alibi. The betrayal wasn't just financial anymore, it was personal. They had looked me in the eyes and lied while building a story that could destroy the one thing I had built from nothing. At 7 the next morning, I drove to the office in the same blazer I had worn the day before. Thomas met me in the parking garage with a thick folder and a quiet nod. Derek had already sent his preliminary report. The server log had been manually edited from an admin account belonging to Ryan Mitchell. The footage was a composite: my face from an old company video, the coat from a photo on my social media, the timestamps altered. It wouldn't hold up in court, but it didn't need to. Perception was the weapon. We walked into the conference room together. My husband was already there with Ryan and Mark Sullivan. Carolyn Bennett sat at the far end of the table, her pearl earrings catching the light. Robert Bennett stood behind her. Amanda, my husband's sister, hovered near the door like she wasn't sure she belonged. Patricia Lang, the board chair, joined by video call on the screen at the head of the table. No one offered me coffee. My husband spoke first, his voice the same reasonable tone from the kitchen. "You're here. Good. Sign the full transfer, and we can all move on before this gets any more public." I set Derek's report and the hospital claims on the table. The footage is fake. Ryan edited the logs from his own admin account. On the night in question, both of you were at a clinic across town using my insurance. I have the claims. Ryan laughed once short and sharp. Stress makes people see conspiracies. Those claims are confidential. You had no right to look. Thomas slid a copy of the edited log toward Mark Sullivan. This is from the company's own system. The edit trail is clear. Your investor has already seen a doctored still. The full story is right here. Mark glanced at the pages but didn't pick them up. Perception matters more than pixels right now, Lauren. The market doesn't like instability. If this leaks, the company loses value. Employees lose jobs. You want that on your conscience. Carolyn spoke from the end of the table, her voice soft but carrying. We've already spoken with the rest of the family. If this becomes a public fight, we will support whatever steps are necessary to protect our name. That includes legal action against anyone who drags it through the mud. The threat was no longer just from my husband. His entire family had lined up behind the lie. I looked at each of them in turn. My husband wouldn't meet my eyes. Ryan smirked like he had already won. Carolyn's expression was carved from stone. Even Patricia on the screen looked away. I felt the last piece of hope I'd been holding crack and fall away. Fighting would mean months of depositions, leaked stories in local business papers, and the slow destruction of the reputation I had spent 10 years building. The employees I had hired and trained would suffer. The clients who trusted me would leave. And at the end of it, the board would still side with the version that protected the company's family name. I had already lost the marriage. I was about to lose the company I had built before I ever met any of them. The only thing I could still choose was how much more damage I was willing to let them cause on the way out. I turned to Thomas. Drop the buyout. Full sale of my remaining shares at fair market value. I want it done by end of day. No non-compete. I keep my personal reputation intact, and they keep the story they want to tell. My husband's head snapped up. Lauren, I kept my voice steady. You wanted control. You can have it, but I'm not signing anything that says I stole from my own company. The buyout agreement states the footage was disputed and the logs were altered. That's the only story that leaves this room with me. Ryan started to object. Mark Sullivan raised a hand and cut him off. It's clean enough. We avoid the scandal. The company stays stable. Done. Carolyn stood. This is the right choice for everyone. I didn't look at her. I looked at my husband. For the first time in days, his face showed something real surprise, maybe even a flicker of regret. It didn't matter. The line had already been crossed. Thomas and I stepped into a side office. He drafted the agreement while I sat with my hands folded in my lap, breathing through the ache that had settled behind my ribs. When it was ready, I signed without reading it twice. The numbers didn't matter anymore. Only the freedom did. By noon, the papers were filed. I walked out of the building with a check for the buyout in my bag and my laptop under my arm. Jessica was waiting in the parking lot like she had promised. She didn't ask what happened. She just opened the passenger door and drove me to her apartment without speaking. That night, I sat on her couch again, this time with divorce papers Thomas had prepared alongside the buyout. I signed those too. My husband didn't call. No one from his family reached out. The inner circle I had once believed was mine had closed ranks without me. In the weeks that followed, I moved into a small rental on the other side of the city. I started taking on freelance clients under a new LLC with a different name. The work was smaller, the hours were longer, but no one questioned my access logs or used my insurance to build a lie. One afternoon, Jessica came over with takeout. We ate on the floor because I hadn't bought furniture yet. She asked the question I had been avoiding. Do you regret it? I thought about the conference room the way every person at that table had chosen the story that protected them over the truth. I thought about the hospital claims and the edited log and the still frame Ryan had sent to Mark Sullivan like it was a weapon. No, I said. I regret believing that loyalty meant staying no matter what they did to me. That was the mistake. Walking away didn't cost me everything. Staying would have. She nodded like she understood. We finished eating in comfortable silence. Later, after she left, I stood at the window of my small apartment and watched the traffic move below. The gated community felt like another lifetime. The company I had built felt like a story someone else was telling now. My husband's name no longer appeared on any of my documents. I had drawn the line the moment I realized the person I loved most was willing to let his coworker destroy me to keep his family's version of the truth. The cost was the life I thought I was supposed to have. The gain was the quiet certainty that I would never again confuse obligation with love. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to choose between the person you married and the person you needed to become, you know how heavy that choice can feel. Where do you draw the line when loyalty stops being mutual and starts becoming a demand? I'd really like to know what you would have done.